Breaking news from Capitol Hill tonight. President Trump is facing an unprecedented third impeachment after comments he made about the United States Constitution sent shockwaves through Washington. Representative Al Green has just filed privileged articles of impeachment that will force a House vote within days. Thousands are protesting outside the White House right now as this political firestorm explodes in real time. All right, so what just happened is absolutely seismic. And I'm not exaggerating when I say we've never seen anything move this fast in American political history. We're talking about the gap between controversial presidential statements and formal impeachment articles being measured in hours, not days, not weeks, but literally hours. On December 3rd, Trump posted on social media suggesting that massive fraud allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. By December 5th, Representative Al Green from Texas had already drafted and introduced privileged impeachment articles. That's a 48-hour turnaround on what could become the third impeachment of Donald Trump's presidency. Think about that for a second. This has never happened before in American history. No president has faced 3 separate impeachment proceedings. Andrew Johnson got one. Bill Clinton got one. Trump is now potentially looking at number 3, and the political world is absolutely losing its mind. Here's what most people don't understand about this situation. This isn't just another Trump controversy that'll blow over in a news cycle. According to constitutional law experts at Harvard and Yale, Trump's statement represents what they're calling the most direct challenge to constitutional supremacy by a sitting president since the Civil War era. When you have a president suggesting that the Constitution itself can be terminated, that's not political rhetoric. That's an existential threat to the entire framework of American democracy. Legal scholars are calling this unprecedented. Former White House counsel under both Republican and Democratic administrations are publicly stating they've never seen anything like it. Even Trump's own former Attorney General William Barr came out and said these comments were deeply concerning and represented a departure from constitutional governance. But wait, it gets worse. Within 48 hours of Trump's initial statement, protests erupted in Washington, D.C., with an estimated 15,000 demonstrators flooding the streets around the White House. According to NPR's count, similar demonstrations materialized in at least 23 major cities including New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Seattle. The Washington Post reported that this represents the largest spontaneous protest movement in response to presidential statements since the Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate. We're talking about people so alarmed by what Trump said that they literally dropped everything and took to the streets. Signs reading, "Defend the Constitution," and "Impeach, Convict, Remove" dominated the demonstrations, and the footage coming out of these protests is absolutely intense. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Representative Al Green isn't just introducing regular impeachment articles, he's using what's called a privileged resolution under House Rule 9, which means Speaker Mike Johnson cannot simply table this or let it die in committee. According to the Congressional Research Service, a privileged resolution forces the House to act within 2 legislative days. They have to vote on whether to proceed, refer it to committee, or table it entirely. Every single member of Congress will be forced to go on record. Every Republican, every Democrat in swing districts, everyone has to decide where they stand on a president who suggested the Constitution could be terminated. That's huge because it turns this into a political weapon that both parties can use in the 2026 midterms, which are now just 10 months away. Let me break this down because the timeline matters. Trump made his initial statement on December 3rd in the context of ongoing election disputes. He wrote, and I'm quoting directly here, that the massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Now, Trump's supporters immediately argued he was speaking figuratively, making a rhetorical point about election integrity. His campaign put out a clarification saying the president believes in the Constitution but also believes that fraud undermines democratic legitimacy. But here's the thing. According to a Reuters analysis, Trump doubled down on these statements at a rally in Michigan on December 4th, where he told supporters that when the system fails, the system needs to be overridden. Legal experts at the Brookings Institution immediately flagged this as what they termed autocratic rhetoric that mirrors language used by authoritarian leaders who seek to consolidate power by delegitimizing democratic institutions. And here's where it gets crazy. Even Republicans started breaking ranks. Senator Mitt Romney, who's never been shy about criticizing Trump, called the statements anathema to the soul of our nation. But what's really significant is that other Republican senators, ones who typically defend Trump, also spoke out. According to The Hill, at least 7 Republican senators, including John Cornyn, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins, issued statements condemning Trump's constitutional comments. When you have GOP senators using words like un-American and dangerous, that tells you something has shifted. That means the political calculus is changing. That means Republicans are worried about how this plays in their home states. Now, here's what nobody's talking about yet. The precedent this sets is absolutely massive. If Congress can impeach a president for statements about the Constitution, even if those statements don't directly result in policy actions, that fundamentally changes the game. It means presidential rhetoric itself becomes impeachable. It means words matter as much as deeds. Constitutional scholars are divided on whether this is good or bad. Some argue it creates necessary accountability for presidential speech that could erode democratic norms. Others worry it weaponizes impeachment as a tool to punish political opponents for controversial statements rather than actual high crimes and misdemeanors. Think about that for a second. We're potentially entering territory where what a president says, not just what they do, can trigger impeachment. Whether you love Trump or hate Trump, you have to admit that's a fundamental shift in how we understand presidential accountability. According to analysis from the Center for American Progress, this could either strengthen constitutional protections or paralyze future presidencies with constant impeachment threats depending on the political composition of Congress. So let's get into the deeper context because there's so much happening beneath the surface that mainstream coverage is completely missing. First, you need to understand who Al Green is and why he's the perfect person to lead this charge. Green is a Democratic representative from Texas's 9th District, and this man has been trying to impeach Trump since literally 2017. According to congressional records, Green introduced articles of impeachment against Trump at least 4 times during the first term. Most of those efforts went nowhere because Democratic leadership under Nancy Pelosi shut them down. Pelosi thought impeachment was too risky politically unless the evidence was overwhelming and bipartisan support existed. But now, everything has changed. Pelosi is no longer Speaker. Mike Johnson leads the House, which means Democrats are in the minority. So why is Green doing this if Democrats don't even control the chamber? Here's the genius of it. By using a privileged resolution, Green forces Republicans to vote. He puts them on the record defending or condemning Trump's constitutional comments. According to political strategists interviewed by Politico, this is less about actually removing Trump and more about creating campaign ammunition for 2026. Democrats can run ads showing Republicans voting against impeachment and say, look, they're okay with a president who wants to terminate the Constitution. Now let's talk about what Trump actually said in more granular detail because context matters enormously here. Trump has been obsessed with election fraud claims since the 2020 election. According to fact-checkers at the Associated Press, Trump and his allies have filed over 60 lawsuits challenging election results, and courts rejected nearly all of them for lack of evidence. But Trump remains convinced, and so do millions of his supporters, that the election was stolen. In Trump's worldview, if there was massive fraud that changed the outcome, then the normal constitutional processes don't apply because the entire system has been compromised. But here's the problem with that argument. The Constitution doesn't include an exception clause that says you can ignore it if you think fraud occurred. According to legal analysis from Georgetown Law School, the Constitution specifically provides remedies for election disputes through the courts, through congressional certification, through impeachment if a president abuses power. These are the mechanisms the founders created. You don't get to throw out the entire document because you're unhappy with an outcome. When Trump talks about terminating constitutional provisions, even his most loyal defenders have to admit that's problematic language. And here's where it gets really interesting. According to the Washington Post, Trump's legal team has been quietly walking back these statements behind the scenes. Anonymous sources close to the president told reporters that Trump was venting, that he was expressing frustration rather than outlining actual policy. But the damage is done. The quote exists. Democrats are going to use it for everything it's worth, and Republicans are stuck defending or distancing themselves from language that sounds inherently un-American. Now, let's look at the protest response because that's telling us something critical about public sentiment. Within 2 days of Trump's comments, according to organizers, approximately 15,000 people showed up in Washington, D.C. They rallied outside the White House. They marched down Pennsylvania Avenue. They held signs demanding Trump's removal from office. And these weren't just the usual protest regulars. According to interviews conducted by CNN, many attendees were first-time protesters who felt compelled to act because constitutional issues crossed a red line for them. The protest footage is absolutely dramatic. You've got crowds chanting, "Defend the Constitution," police presence maintaining order, media helicopters capturing aerial views of the massive gatherings, and it's not just happening in D.C. According to reports compiled by The Guardian, similar demonstrations materialized in New York with an estimated 8,000 participants, Los Angeles with 6,000, Chicago with 4,500, and Seattle with 3,000. This is a coordinated nationwide response to what activists see as an unprecedented threat to constitutional order. Organizers told Politico they're planning sustained protests leading up to the House vote, with daily demonstrations scheduled outside congressional offices. Now, Trump's supporters are going to look at these protests and say, yeah, of course, it's the same people who always protest Trump, the same activists who've been calling for his impeachment since day one. They're just using this as another excuse. And okay, there's some truth to that. According to polling data from Pew Research, approximately 87% of the protesters identify as Democrats or lean Democratic. But that doesn't mean their concerns aren't legitimate. You can dislike Trump and also have valid constitutional worries. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. The question is whether this movement has staying power. According to political analysts at 538, protest movements typically need 3 things to translate into actual political change: sustained energy over months, not days, conversion of street demonstrations into voter registration and turnout, and ability to influence swing district representatives who fear electoral consequences. Right now, it's unclear whether this movement has all 3 elements aligned. What we do know is that Democratic strategists are watching closely to see if these protests can shift public opinion enough to make impeachment politically viable. Here's what we know about the numbers in Congress. Democrats currently hold 212 seats in the House. Republicans hold 220. That's a narrow Republican majority. For impeachment to pass, you'd need a simple majority, which means Democrats would need to hold their entire caucus together and flip at least 6 Republicans. According to vote counters interviewed by The Hill, that's theoretically possible, but unlikely. Most Republicans represent districts where Trump remains extremely popular. Voting for impeachment would be political suicide in a primary. But here's where the Senate math gets really complicated. Even if the House somehow passed impeachment articles, The Senate would need 67 votes to convict and remove Trump from office. Republicans currently hold 52 Senate seats. Democrats hold 48. That means you'd need 19 Republican senators to cross party lines and vote to convict Trump. According to Senate watchers at roll call, that's a nearly impossible bar to clear. We've seen this movie before. Trump was impeached twice in his first term. Both times the Senate acquitted him with only a handful of Republicans voting to convict. So why would this time be different? Democrats need to answer that question. They need to explain what's changed. What's the new evidence? What makes this impeachment more compelling than Ukraine or January 6th? And their answer is this is about the Constitution itself. This isn't about a specific policy dispute or even inciting a riot. This is about a president saying the foundational document of our democracy can be terminated. That's the pitch, and they're hoping that enough Republicans will find that argument persuasive. But here's the reality check. According to polling from Morning Consult, Trump's approval rating among Republican voters remains at 81%. Republican senators who cross Trump face primary challenges funded by his massive political operation. They face backlash from conservative media. They risk losing their seats. So even if they're personally uncomfortable with Trump's constitutional comments, the political incentive is to stick with him, downplay the controversy, and move on to other issues. And that's exactly what you're seeing play out. According to statements compiled by Axios, several Republican senators condemned Trump's remarks using strong language about respecting the Constitution. But when asked directly if they'd support impeachment, suddenly it's all deflection. We need to see the evidence. We need to understand the full context. We need to let the process play out. It's trying to have it both ways, trying to look principled without actually taking a stand. That's not normal. That's a pattern we've seen throughout Trump's presidency. Now, let's talk about the constitutional crisis aspect because that term is getting thrown around constantly. According to scholars at the Constitutional Accountability Center, a constitutional crisis occurs when there's a serious dispute about the meaning or application of the Constitution that can't be resolved through normal institutional processes. And some experts argue we're in exactly that situation right now. You've got a president making statements that appear to challenge constitutional supremacy. You've got Congress trying to hold him accountable through impeachment. You've got courts potentially getting involved if any of this leads to actual policy changes. And you've got the public taking to the streets demanding action. All of these institutions are colliding. All of these tensions are coming to a head, and there's no clear resolution in sight. According to analysis from Lawfare blog, this represents a stress test of American democratic institutions unlike anything we've seen since Watergate. The difference is that Nixon resigned before the full impeachment process played out. Trump has shown zero inclination to resign no matter how intense the pressure becomes. Other experts push back hard on the constitutional crisis framing. According to conservative legal scholars at the Federalist Society, this is just politics as usual, partisan fighting, Democrats trying to damage Trump politically, Republicans defending their guy. Nothing about this is truly unprecedented. We've had impeachments before. We've had presidential conflicts with Congress before. We've had heated constitutional debates before. This is all within normal parameters of American political conflict. So, who's right? Are we in a constitutional crisis or not? Honestly, it might be too early to tell. According to historians interviewed by The Atlantic, constitutional crises are often only recognizable in hindsight. We need to see how this plays out. Does impeachment move forward? Does Trump change his rhetoric? Do Republicans break ranks? Do courts get involved? All of those factors will determine whether this is a temporary political storm or something more fundamental to American governance. One thing that's definitely true: this is exhausting for the American public. According to a recent Gallup poll, 68% of Americans report feeling fatigued by political news and controversy. We've been through so much Trump drama already. 2 impeachments, January 6th, the election disputes, multiple criminal indictments, civil trials, investigations. People are tired. Even people who care deeply about politics are starting to tune out. There's genuine Trump fatigue across the political spectrum, and that fatigue might actually work in Trump's favor. Because if people are numb to controversy, if they've heard it all before, then one more impeachment doesn't hit as hard. It doesn't shock the conscience. It just feels like more of the same. Democrats need to overcome that fatigue. They need to make this feel different. They need to convince voters that constitutional comments are a bigger deal than past scandals. That's a tough sell when you've been warning about Trump for years, and he's still standing, still president, still dominating the news cycle. Now, here's what most people don't understand about the immediate timeline. Al Green introduced his privileged resolution under House Rule 9 on December 5th. According to parliamentary experts, that means House leadership must schedule action within 2 legislative days. They can't just sit on this indefinitely. Speaker Johnson has 3 options: allow a vote on the actual impeachment articles, introduce a motion to refer the articles to committee for investigation, or introduce a motion to table the resolution entirely, which would kill it. Each option has massive political implications. If Johnson allows a full vote on impeachment, every Republican member goes on record either defending or condemning Trump's constitutional statements. According to strategists interviewed by The New York Times, Republicans in swing districts are terrified of this scenario. They don't want to anger Trump's base by voting for impeachment, but they also don't want to alienate moderate voters by appearing to endorse terminating the Constitution. If Johnson refers the articles to committee, that buys time but doesn't solve the problem. The Judiciary Committee would have to hold hearings, call witnesses, review evidence. That process could drag on for weeks or months, keeping impeachment in the headlines throughout the 2026 campaign season. Democrats would love that scenario because it allows them to continuously highlight Trump's controversial statements. If Johnson moves to table the resolution, that kills impeachment immediately but creates different political problems. Democrats can run ads saying Republicans refuse to even investigate whether the president violated his constitutional oath. They can paint the GOP as complicit in Trump's assault on democratic norms. According to focus group research conducted by Democratic pollsters, that messaging resonates with independent voters who are concerned about institutional integrity. The smart money says Johnson probably tries to refer the articles to committee, which gives him political cover while avoiding an immediate floor vote. But according to sources close to House leadership speaking to Punchbowl News, there's intense disagreement within the Republican conference about how to handle this. Some members want to confront it head-on and defend Trump. Others want to make it disappear as quickly as possible. Johnson is stuck trying to keep his caucus united while managing the optics. Meanwhile, Trump himself is responding exactly how you'd expect. According to reports from Truth Social, Trump has posted multiple times calling this the greatest witch hunt in American history. He's claiming Democrats are trying to interfere with the 2026 elections. He's attacking Al Green personally, calling him a desperate politician seeking attention. This is happening in real time, and Trump's strategy is clear. Turn this into a partisan circus, rally his base around the idea that he's being persecuted, and dare Republicans to stand with him against the Democratic establishment. And you know what? That strategy has worked before. According to polling data from the first 2 impeachments, Trump's approval ratings among Republicans actually increased during both proceedings. His supporters rallied around him. They donated record amounts to his campaign. They showed up at rallies wearing witch hunt victim merchandise. Trump understands that impeachment can be politically useful if you control the narrative and keep your base energized. But here's where this situation might be different. According to focus groups conducted by Republican pollsters and reported by National Review, Trump's constitutional comments are causing concern even among some loyal supporters. When you show voters the direct quote about terminating constitutional provisions, support drops even in deep red districts. People are willing to defend Trump on lots of issues, but questioning the Constitution itself crosses a line for many conservatives who view themselves as constitutionalists. That's the vulnerability Democrats are trying to exploit. They're betting that Trump finally said something so extreme that even his own party can't fully defend it. Whether that bet pays off depends on how Republicans respond over the coming days and weeks. According to political strategists, we're in a wait-and-see moment where everyone's watching the polls, measuring public reaction, and calculating their next move. Now, let's talk about what happens next in 3 realistic scenarios. Scenario 1. The House passes impeachment articles with only Democratic votes. This is the most likely outcome according to congressional observers. Democrats stick together, vote as a bloc, send articles to the Senate. Republicans vote against impeachment, claim it's partisan politics, and the whole thing dies in the Senate where conviction is impossible without significant GOP support. Trump declares victory, uses it as campaign fuel, and we move on to the next controversy. Scenario 2. Enough moderate Republicans break ranks to give impeachment bipartisan support. According to NBC News vote counters, you'd need at least 6 Republicans to cross over. This would be a game changer because it makes impeachment appear less partisan and more legitimate. It increases pressure on Senate Republicans to take the charges seriously. But according to most analysts, this scenario is unlikely unless something dramatic changes in public opinion or new evidence emerges that makes Trump's statements even more damaging.